Ladies and gentle people, I'm exactly 1 hour late, with apologies. So I guess there was some kind of like Japanese special 1 day only daylight savings adjustment that we will use as an excuse for why I'm an hour late. So let's see if anybody's around. We got people. Okay, there's nobody around. But there was a lot of chat. Sorry that I missed it all. Let's see. So this will get recorded, and then you can get the answers to your questions there. And if more people come in, I'll start to answer those questions. So John Barker says, "Who's responsible for Maya and how?" So first, what is Maya? Maya. People think Maya means illusion, but actually Maya means power or magic. That's the true meaning of the word Maya. And so who is responsible for power? The powerful. So this is the difference between Shakti and Shaktiman. Power is Shakti and Shaktiman is the powerful. So, for example, the basic power is consciousness and the basic powerful is person. Person is the entity who is conscious. Remember we talked about Atma and Brahman in the last week? So Atma is the person and Brahman is the consciousness that the person has as the Shakti. So it's that Atma which is responsible for the Maya or the power. Now in the traditional sense of Maya means illusion, that's a power. That's a power that objects have, is to conceal themselves, or make themselves seem to be something that they are not. So that power, the Shaktiman for that power is Prakriti, the object. Who's responsible for being in Maya, as we say? When you're in Maya, it means like you're under the influence of an illusion. That's the Atma. It's because the Atma... Look, we got 18 people. Hello. So I'm just answering the questions that were asked while I was not here. So the person is the one who's responsible for being an illusion, not having an accurate perception. So yeah, guys, as I was saying, sorry for being exactly 1 hour late. I think I got some kind of Japanese thing with the hour different. Maybe you guys switched daylight saving time and I didn't, or maybe I just spaced out. So Neil Stevens asked if there's any update on the new book. The update on the new book is, once I started doing that Life Lessons from the Vedic Nakshatra series of videos, then I finally realized exactly what format I wanted the commentary to be in. And so I'm revising the previous manuscript that I had thought was almost ready to print to be like 10 times better. So it's going to probably come out shortly after I finish that series. All right, let's see what other questions we got. Let's see who's new here. All of a sudden we got a bunch of people. How can I even tell? Oh, great. All right, so should I start with these new questions? I'll start with the new questions that have come in after something. If Rahu is our future path, why does it act with illusions? Well, Rahu is not necessarily your future path. Just understand what Rahu is, the north node of the moon. Let me move over so you can actually see my face. Rahu is the north node of the moon. So that means, do you know what a node is? Node means a place where two things contact, right? So where one thing can access another, that's a node. So the sun has an orbit, and the moon has an orbit, and the place where they contact each other is called the node. And then there's one node where the moon will be heading north, in other words, up of the ecliptic plane, the sun's plane, and the other place where they meet, the moon will be heading south. So Rahu is the place where the sun is coming up and out and moving forward, and the Ketu node, the south node, is the place where the moon is going down, in, and back to its origin spot. So all the symbolism of Rahu has to do with that fact that it comes up and out and forward, and all the symbolism of Ketu has to do with that fact that it's going in and down and backwards. So that's why people say Rahu represents your future life, the future, etc. And why is it Rahu is also connected with things that are confusing? Because what Rahu does is causes eclipses, and they're unseen and they're difficult to track. So the symbolism is that they're confusing. What's the problem there? Your future is always confusing. Future is uncertain, and the end is always near. So it just makes sense that the planet of confusion would be also the planet of the future, right? All right. We got another question here. We got another question, which is, how does a debilitated planet affect the nakshatra it is in? The way that I would do that is I wouldn't directly say that, well, this planet is debilitated, therefore it has this effect in the nakshatra, but I would just bear in mind that, well, this planet's debilitated. So to give you an example, let me do this right. Let me pull up a little map so I can get the right things. So I'll give you a little example of what I'm talking about. All right, so let's say you want debilitated. Good, here's a good example. So let's take Jupiter and Mula. So Jupiter and Mula, this actually explains a lot, actually. So I just did the video on Mula, and some of the comments about Jupiter, people who had Jupiter and Mula were interesting, because Jupiter and Mula on its own tends to indicate that you're going to come into conflicts with lawgivers, morality establishers, things like that, teachers, because you see how they contradict themselves, and they can't pull the wool over your eyes the same way they can pull the wool over the rest of their followers. So, however, if you look at where Mula is in the sky currently, the solstice, the lower solstice, the southern solstice, the winter solstice, is happening in Mula now. So tropical Capricorn is happening right in the middle of Mula. So on one side of Mula you got Sagittarius, and on the other side of Mula you got Capricorn tropically. So if you got Jupiter and Mula, it might be in its own sign, it might be in its tricone, in its male sign, or it might be in a debilitated condition, depending on which half of Mula it's in. And so the way that I would say that is just overall a debilitated planet is less likely to give its good results and more likely to give its harsh results. And an exalted planet, or a planet in its own sign, is more likely to do the opposite. It's more likely to give good things, good versions of what it signifies, and less likely to give harsh versions of what it signifies. So therefore, a Jupiter in Mula that's on the Sagittarius side is more likely to mean like you really can get into law and morality and stuff where you're positively rooting out the lies and establishing something really good. Whereas a Jupiter in Capricorn Mula would be like you're more just clashing with the authorities. And that's your basic template for how you just want to do astrology in general. You have to just blend a whole lot of things together. So you just take the basic theory of what the debilitated planet does and apply it to the interpretation that you're making of the nakshatra. I hope that helps explain. Let's take another question. Prashant says, Venus rules the 11th house. So I'm reading your questions to see if I like them or not. So don't get upset with me if I feel like it's too specific or something. So, all right, if Venus rules the 11th house, then what happens with that? Doesn't it also rule the 4th? That's called Badaka. So there's a theory that the Badaka planet is difficult to deal with. And the truth within that theory is that usually the Badaka, because the 11th house is external pleasures and the 4th house is internal pleasures. So if the same planet controls both, it's a sensitive planet. So that's all I'm going to say about that. That's all I'm going to say about if Venus rules the 11th. Is it functional benefic, functional malefic? It's not so useful to be that digital about your consideration. Because look at what we had to just do with the nakshatras. You're going to have to be blending everything in analog anyway. So better to make like a really hard and fast rule about what it does. Better is for you to just remember, hey, this planet rules the 4th house and the 11th house. And how that works together is, I don't know, maybe if the person is not getting their external satisfactions, that they might feel very disturbed internally as well by that. That's the best I can offer you on that right now. Because really, I know people want answers to certain types of questions, like a question like that. But a lot of these things, they only work when you're actually looking at a specific chart. And looking at a specific chart, it also isn't something that you go like this. You have to soak. At least I have to soak myself into the chart that I'm reading. So I'm not like the kind of guy that I just look at a chart for a second and then I give you an answer. But I gotta like put my consciousness in there. So even if you give me a whole bunch of lists now about what's going on with this Venus, I have to actually want to put my consciousness into it to soak it in, to give you a real answer on it. All right. Vaidyanathan Purushottamam says, how does the mutual aspect of retrograde planets work? Why worry? Don't worry. Just understand what a mutual aspect is and understand what a retrograde planet is. And then you're fine. It's not like you have to make a new category of rule about a mutual aspect of retrograde planets. The retrograde planet is more powerful because it's more intense. It's going against the stream. It has the ability to go against the grain, to swim in an unusual direction. So that planet gets more bala. For better or for worse, it has more strength. That's it. And then it's got a mutual aspect with somebody else. So that mutual aspect's got more strength and it has a nature of going against the grain. You know, sometimes people might feel like my answers are too simple, but if you don't keep your astrology simple, you'll be overwhelmed. Because think about doing anything. Anything is simple. Think about playing an instrument like a veena or a guitar. It's really simple. There's a string, you hit it. You put your finger on it. That's it. It's real simple. The difficult part is doing all the subtleties of it all at once, all at the same time. So if you get overly complicated about how you're going to hit the thing and how you're going to put your finger on it, you're going to get overwhelmed when it actually really gets complicated. So try to keep the simple things really simple. Floating wisdom. Can you recommend any place or journey through India for someone? I hate when YouTube does this. It changes my scroll. That's wrong. Now I got to scroll all the way up again. Thank you, Natasha. Gosh, where is this? Can you recommend any place or journey through India for someone who wants to immerse themselves in Vedic learning and maybe visit some temples? It's not sightseeing. So it's not like you have to go to a certain spot. If you really want to... God, I wish I could remember this verse, but Vidura... I think Yudhishthira says to Vidura in the Bhagavad Purana that the sacred place that you want to visit is actually you. He says to a person. He says the true sacredness in a sacred place are the people who have wisdom who dwell there. So it's really not about, you don't even have to go to India to learn Vedic culture. You just have to contact a good source. Even if you're in India, even if you go to a holy place, you might just be meeting a bunch of tourist traps, you know. So better for getting into real contact with Indian wisdom, you just need to look for a good teacher. And you don't have to do that in person necessarily. Well, it's great. In person is great, but being in person is probably something you want to do at stage 3 or something. You know, like you would first shop with like a catalog or you shop on Amazon, but later on you can go and actually touch the things when you've narrowed it down. So do something like that. Pandit Himanshu. I am in Ashlesha ascendant and moon in Mrigashirsha. Can you tell me about that? See, I would rather have you tell me some stuff about what you think, but it's this pretty fascinating combination of nakshatras. What they both have in common is that they're kind of attractive. Mrigashirsha is very beautiful and Ashlesha is very charming. Like, not charming, but enchanting, seductive. But where they clash is that Ashlesha is passionate and Mrigashirsha is timid. So the thing that you would have in your favor by having Ashlesha ascendant and Mrigashirsha moon is charisma, attractiveness. But the thing that you would have to work on with that combination is how to be aggressive with your passions at the right time and how to not. And, like, in other words, when to step forward and say, I'm here and I'm going to do this. And when to say, hello, my name is blah, blah, I want this. And when to just sit back and be passive. When to act and when to wait. Another question is debilitated Jupiter and debilitated Mercury. I don't know. Maybe I'm not focused, but I'm not going to answer that one right now. Sorry. Does your shirt have only one button? No, but I just like to button only one button. Does Kalsarpa yoga exist? It exists. It's a certain kind of yoga. It's not as big or important as they say it is. But what happens with Kalsarpa yoga is all the planets get on one side of the sky. So that tends to make other kinds of yogas that are nabhas yogas, that are shape yogas. So when Kalsarpa yogas line up with the cardinal points, like 10th, 4th houses, 7th, 1st houses, then you also get nabhas yogas. So you can tell a lot from... the nabhas yogas are very useful for telling a lot about the basic nature of the chart. Where all the planets are underground, the person has to really try hard to externalize themselves. Where all the planets are above ground, they have to try hard to stabilize themselves and internalize themselves, etc. When they're all on the east side, they have to try hard to go out and meet other people and care about other people. And when they're all on the west side, they have to work hard to realize the value of themselves. Prashant's asking, what about Rashi aspects versus planetary aspects? I don't even use Rashi aspects, so I'm the wrong person to ask. And the other thing that I'm going to say is, when you do use planetary aspects, make sure you use them right. Planetary aspects are not Rashi aspects, so they're not to the whole entire sign. Planetary aspects are to a particular degree. This is called the sputa. It's to a particular point. Okay? So I ignore Rashi aspects, which are the Jaimini, typically called Jaimini type aspects, right? That's the one you're talking about. And I just use planetary aspects to the exact point. So that means that instead of saying the moon aspects the 7th house, you have to say the moon aspects the 7th segment of degree, which is 180 degrees. 7 minus 1 times 30. So you say this is what Parashar teaches. The moon aspects 180 degrees to full strength. It aspects 150 degrees, the 6th point, to 0 strength. And if it's any point in between, is a ratio between those two, etc. What do I think of Yogini Dasha system? Similar thing. I just don't use it. You see, I just like to be simple. But the thing is, it works. So I don't feel like I need to use stuff because the stuff that I'm using works because I'm just using it simply. And it's not failing me, so I don't need to go out and check out other junk, other stuff. Hey, my Suli says, now, so also when people tell me, this is another reason why I don't like to answer specific questions about your chart, because I don't believe in the accuracy or reliability of a sidereal zodiac. So when people are telling me things about their sidereal placements, and then I'm going to try to answer that, and then they're going to say, does that match me or not? I don't know. So I don't like to talk about your specific chart unless you're going to agree to talk about it tropically. The difference between the Rashi aspect and the Graha aspect, the difference is a Rashi aspect says, and somebody can correct me if I don't get the details right, but the Rashi aspect says if a planet is in a cardinal sign, then it's going to, by virtue of the fact that it's in a cardinal sign, it's going to affect any planet that's in, I think it's a fixed sign, except the one that's right next to it. I think that's the rule. And that's the type of rule that on which those aspects work. Whereas the planetary aspect it's geometrical, so that if, like for example with the moon, if the moon is at 1 degree Aries, then it's going to be able to see, this is the drishti that it has, it's going to be able to see right across the sky from it to 1 degree Libra perfectly. So if something is at a certain amount of degrees from a planet, then it gets aspected. That's the planetary aspect. Let's see what else we got. So, yeah, a lot of people are asking like specific things about their planet. What happens with a prominent but negative dignity planet? So that's simple. Sanskriti, nice to see you, or you see your text. Prominent but negative dignity planet is the one that you don't want to have. That's the template that you don't want to have. So planets have two primary characteristics, which could be broken down into 3. The 2 primary characteristics are how powerful is it and how nice is it? How positive is it? So you can say a planet can be nice or nasty, and then it can also be strong or weak. They're 2 different considerations. So what the best thing that you want is a nice planet that's strong. That's like somebody that really likes you and has a lot of money. And then the other, or whatever, they really like you and they're really strong. So you know that they're going to actually protect you. The worst thing that you can get is somebody that really hates you and is really strong. So that's like a planet that has very low dignity, but it's very prominent in the chart. It's going to cause a lot of problems. The planets that don't have a lot of prominence in the chart, then whether or not they're positive or negative really doesn't make that much difference, because they don't have that much of a direct effect themselves. But the exceptions are, not exceptions, but the thing that you have to be aware of is that the planet that has the lowest prominence, the very low prominence, it becomes conspicuous too, because it's so missing. So the planet that has the lowest prominence is also prominent, but in a conspicuous way. Like, where is it? Where are the things that this signifies? And the other thing that you have to understand is about when you're figuring out the power that a planet has, it has its raw power, which is like Shadbala, and then it has its opportunity to use it, which is Shadbala multiplied by some other factors. So when you do the overall chart assessment, then the prominence, the Shadbala multiplied by the other factors is very, very important. But when you're looking at things that don't concern the overall chart, but you just want to know about what this planet is doing, let's say in a conjunction with another planet, then you would look at raw dignity, raw power, Shadbala. So sometimes there's a planet that, let's say, is very good, very positive, and it has Shadbala, but it's not in an alignment with the ascendant and the sun and the moon and other planets that makes it very prominent in the chart. But it is conjoined with some other planet. So that positive or negative planet can still exert itself on that other planet because of the raw power. Hopefully that made some sense. Let's see. If you have a lousy birth chart, Tampa Todd, is there anything you can do to alter your bad karmic reaction? Yeah. First thing is to consider about what the meaning of good and bad is. So, because good and bad is a relative. That's always relative. Good means allows us good. Happiness means achieving the desire, and sadness means not achieving the desire. So good means helps us achieving the desire, and bad means hinders us from achieving the desire. So that's what lousy means. Loud means hinders us from achieving the desire. So once you understand what lousy means, you know how to fix it. So the way that you fix it is, you might think that you can't change the board in a board game. And you can't change the cards that you're dealt. But you can change, nor can you change like the random stuff like how dice rolls. But you can change your strategies and you can change your objectives. Yeah, for example, like even when you're playing a game and you're losing, you could change your objective from wanting to win to wanting to have fun. And then you still wind up happy. So the key to analyzing a birth chart profitably is to figure out what sort of desires should I have, because the desires are in your control, though there's momentum to desires too. It's not like they're at your beck and call, but it's more doable to change your desires than it is to change your body, your manifest karma. So the profitable way to look at a lousy chart is to think, what would this chart not be lousy for? And how can I make myself want that? Want the stuff that this chart is not lousy for? Instead of insisting that I have to get what I wanted originally, which is causing me suffering, let me see what the universe wants me to do in this lifetime. And then want that. Rob Van Vondren asks, what's the best approach to learning one's chart for verdict astrology? Unfortunately, I don't know what verdict astrology means. But the best approach to learning your own chart is you got to start by understanding the components. So you first have to start by understanding the planets, the signs, and the houses, and the nakshatras if you want to use those also. And the key, the kicker is, the better you understand those components, the better you're going to read your chart. So if you feel like, I'm not really understanding this chart, the real reason is not because you don't know these confusing techniques, but the real reason is that you're not really clear about the components. So just study the components really carefully. Learn them so that they make absolute sense and you feel like you know everything about them. Eveready wants me to talk about Yogini Dasha. That's another Dasha system that I don't use. Mercury in Revati, Pada 4. Mercury in Revati. Revati is the nakshatra. I don't use padas, but Mercury in Revati. Revati, or look, since you told me that it's in Pada 4, I know it's towards the end. So I can figure out the location also. All right, so fine, it's going to be in Aries. Tropical Aries. So Mercury in Revati. Revati is the nakshatra of parenting and nurturing. And it's an intelligent nakshatra. So Mercury in Revati is good. It gives a good ability to learn things. Now, however, it's in Aries at this point in time. So Mercury in Aries is going to be like self-directed learning. And so Mercury in terms of in Revati, it's good intellect, but the learning process is better when it's self-directed rather than like under the guidance of somebody else. And the thing about the parenting is the parenting approach should be more friendship oriented because Mercury is friendly. And then the friendships in life probably also take a parenting tone where you're actually taking care of your friends a lot, nourishing them. You need friends too to nourish you. What do we got next? Hey, Nancy. Anurag Srivatsav. What does Venus conjunct Jupiter in Purva Palguni? Right, so Purva Palguni is supposed to be male. So this is the one thing you should take away. Purva Palguni is supposed to be the masculine sexuality, and Uttara Palguni is the feminine sexuality. But Venus, so you're talking about Venus in Purva Palguni. Well, it's a benefic planet. So it's nice. Venus in Purva Palguni with Jupiter, who's knowledgeable. So there's good understanding. It's nice that your name's Anurag. There's nice understanding of aesthetics and raga and things like that. There's nice understanding of art, beauty, things when Venus is in any Palguni or Jupiter in any Palguni. However, we would have preferred if we could have got that Venus in the Uttara Palguni, because then it would have put the feminine planet in the feminine nakshatra. When the feminine planet occupies the masculine nakshatra, then the courtship, the energy that's involved in courtships doesn't come naturally. So, if in your case, it just would be like when you're supposed to take an aggressive step or an initiating step, you won't. And that would affect romance and such and so forth, but it would probably also affect anything. So it's a wise thing. You get a lot of knowledge of arts. You get a lot of knowledge of how beauty works and how aesthetics works and what's pleasing to people. But it's going to have sort of like a negative impact on being successful, forging partnerships, because of doing the passive thing when you should have done the aggressive thing, and doing the aggressive thing when you should have done the passive thing. So do me a favor, if you're going to ask me questions about specific placements, let me know if you're talking about sidereal or tropical or not, because I use tropical. Sixth Lord in sixth house and Venus in there. Sixth Lord in sixth house should be good, right? A Lord in the house should be good. But if it's Venus doesn't really like to be in the sixth house. But an exception is Venus with, it's not an exception, but things that would modify the principle is that, well, if it's the sixth Lord. But if Venus is not the sixth Lord in the sixth house, then it's a little bit of softness towards the enemies. Forgiveness towards enemies who shouldn't have been forgiven. Best approach to reading a Vedic chart: learn the basics. Learn Sankhya. If you learn the basics of what planets are, you'll wind up learning Sankhya, which means being able to carefully know the difference between a mind and an intellect, of Mercury and Venus, and consciousness or ego, the sun. To know the difference between male and female, Prakriti and Purusha, then you'll know Mars and Venus. To learn the difference between Nivriti and Pavriti, then you'll know the difference between Saturn and Jupiter. So, the best way to learn Vedic chart is, the best way to do Vedic astrology is to understand the Vedic outlook on life first, and then understand how it applies to understanding the planets especially. And then the best way to actually read a chart is to know your house yogas. I feel, besides the stuff of, you have to be able to know, first of all, how to do a basic interpretation. So the basic interpretation thing is, when there's a synergy or sameness between two items, combine those items in a positive way. And when there's a clash between two items, combine those items in a negative way. So, for example, Venus in the sixth house. Venus is forgiveness. The sixth house is enemies. Yes, sure, Jesus Christ wants you to forgive your enemies, but if you forgive your enemies, they beat you up. So if you're ready to be Jesus Christ and get put on a cross, then fine, go ahead and do that. But if you want to live a normal life, don't forgive your enemies. Be tough on your enemies. Be tough on your competitors. Third house especially, that's like that too. So the fact that Venus is forgiveness and the sixth house is people that want to fight with you, that's a clash in the symbolism. So the interpretation of Venus in the sixth house will be, you're forgiving your enemies. You shouldn't be. Whereas if you take something like Mars and put it in the sixth house, Mars is aggression. Sixth house is fighting. Your people you have to fight. So you don't give it an interpretation like you fight too much. You give it an interpretation like you keep your enemies in check. It's good. You're not getting carried away in battles all the time. And you're not getting abused and exploited by people because you're keeping your enemies in check, because you have discipline with them. So that's the basic thing. If to read a Vedic chart or any chart, the first thing that you need to do is that basic rule about how to do interpretations. That's planet in a house, planet in a sign. It's the same principle. Planetary conjunctions, aspects from one planet to another. It's all the same principle. Where there's synergy, the interpretation goes positive. Where there's clash, the interpretation goes negative. Where there's nothing important. And then the second thing, once you got that down pat, the second thing is to know how to combine things. So again, then you just do a meta version of the same thing. Like I got Venus in the 6th house, and I got Jupiter in the 3rd house. So they're both telling me the same thing. So I know that this thing is this is getting magnified. They're both telling me that there's too much gentility and treating the enemies as if they're not really enemies, and treating animals as if they can be reasoned with. Okay. So, and then after, I would say the first real technique that you really want to learn for Vedic charts is house-based interpretations. That's why the Vedic chart that's why the Indian charts are still drawn the way they're drawn, because they're very, very amenable to house-based interpretation. You really want to know basic yogas. You really want to know the Dharma, Karma, Adipati Yoga, the combinations between angular and trinal lords. And you really want to consider the combinations. Like what lord is joining with what lord is really, really important for being able to do the kind of things that the astrologers in India did classically. What else we got here? What else we got? What's my Lagna Nakshatra? It's Uttarashada. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's high in Uttara. I think it's... Let me look. Let me tell you about me. Vic. Nah, it's not that high. It's not that high in Uttarashada. It's kind of in the middle of Uttarashada, but it's Uttarashada. Yep, and Rohini is my moon's nakshatra. Let's see what else we got there. Floating wisdom, Jupiter conjunct Ketu and Pusha. That's a good cocktail for spirituality and understanding mysticism and mystical things. That's a great cocktail for that. Anytime Jupiter and Ketu come together, then you can learn about Ketu subjects really well. So Ketu subjects include mysticism, psychology, spirituality, anything internal and deep and introverted becomes something that you can have Jupiter about, you can have wisdom about. And then if it's in Pusha, which is Brihaspati's nakshatra, that means that you can get success with that. What about Venus and Satabhishak? Nancy, Venus and Satabhishak is sexy. Because Satabhishak means 1,000 unions. The word literally means 1,000 unions. This Abhishak, right? It's Shata Bishak. And what Abhishak literally is application between two things. Everybody thinks that Bishak means doctor, because doctors are called Bishakas, because they give you medicine. And traditional medicines are either ointments that go on your skin or powders that go on your mouth. So the concept of giving a medicine is applying a medicine. They're called anjanas, right? They apply them to you. That kind of a thing is called a bishak. So, but what bishak actually means is application. So shata bishak means 1,000 applications. So it is actually quite a sensual nakshatra, because you know what this could possibly mean. And when you look at Nakshatra Sutra for Satabhishak, it's definitely pointing out that meaning of the word Satabhishak, because it says Vishvakshatir avastad. No, Vishvakshaya avastad, Vishvakshatir prastad avastad. It's saying that it can take the whole expanse of space and put it together to make the earth. So it can condense and crystallize things together to make something solid. So Venus in Satabhishak usually means a lot of romantic relationships, or a lot of desires for romance, a lot of passion. So Venus in Satabhishak is good for exciting romance. Hopefully it's got good aspects, etc., good dignity. Prashant wants to know if I use avastas. God, I'm so simple. I don't use any of this stuff. I don't use avastas, but they do seem interesting. One day I might. Can I please explain about Gandanta? Mula characteristics, Shital wants to know. So, in a sidereal zodiac, the Gandanta aligns with Mula, isn't it? Is that why you're saying Gandanta Mula? I'm just going to tell you what Gandanta it means. Anta, you know the word anta means end. And Ganda is a section. Like, this is a Ganda, because it's one section. And this is another Ganda. And this little spot in between is the Gandanta. That's where the two sections meet. So the zodiac, it's made out of elements. It's made out of earth, water, fire, and air. And then the planets take possession of those segments of earth, water, fire, air, and cultivate it. That's what the zodiac basically is. So there's four elements, right? But there's 12 signs. So therefore there's 3 segments in the zodiac. There's going to be 3 of each type of element. And the pattern is always the same. It's always fire, earth, air, water, fire, earth, air, water, fire, earth, air, water, as you go around the 12 signs. So each one of those fire, earth, air, water chunks is the Ganda. And the border in between those Gandas is the Anta. So it's significant because it's restarting the elemental sequence. And in order to restart the elemental sequence, you have to go from water to fire, which is a significant change. Also, if you consider that the Navamsha is quite important, then the Navamsha doesn't end. It means you won't get a Pisces Navamsha at the end of a zodiac sign until that 4th sign. You get it at the 4th sign. So the Navamshas also have a restart there. So it makes a big segment. Every 4 signs is a big segment, and the Gandanta is the line in between the 2 segments. And the thing about crossing any line or crossing any border is you got to show a passport or whatever. It's a little bit, you have to slow down. You have to take your mind off of the other things that you were doing when you're crossing a border and just get the crossing of the border done. So when planets cross borders, they sort of they blur. They're not really focused on what they're doing. They're not really focused on whether they're doing the thing that they wanted to do on that side of the border or on that side of the border, and they kind of do both, but both at like half efficiency. So that's even more pronounced when you're talking about the Gandanta border, because it's a border of quite a few things. This is an interesting question. God, this is an interesting question that I should never answer. Nancy wants to know if I'll ever do a video with Kapil again. I'm not going to answer that question. Daval Dave. I've observed that family members have some common nakshatras. Also, conjunctions can be passed along generations. What is your experience? 100%. 100%. My eldest son, see, if you look at my eldest son, he looks exactly like my wife. And if you look at my second son, he looks exactly like me. And if you look at my daughter, she looks kind of like both of us. So my eldest son has the exact same moon and ascendant as my wife. The middle child, the younger son who looks like me, has his ascendant where my moon is and has Saturn in his ascendant, since my ascendant is Capricorn. And then my daughter has her mother's moon and her ascendant in the same spot as her younger brother. I mean, the younger of the two brothers. So in other words, she has her ascendant in the same place as my moon. Then the thing about the older son is his ascendant is exactly 180 degrees opposite from mine. And his dashas often are exactly like, because of there's some weird thing about the way that it was timed. His Rahu and Ketu dashas very often coincide with mine, the sub-dashas and things. That's just me because I know my family's chart very well. Or if you just look up at my parents, they're super Saturn charts. They've got Saturn ascendants and Saturn all over the place, and so is mine. So yeah, you definitely find this all the time because that's what happens, right? You inherit a lot of things from your parents. But it's not going to be simple like my mom is a Cancer, but I'm not a Cancer, right? It's not going to be simple. So it's like my son, for example, he's got his ascendant exactly where my moon is, my son and daughter. So it's not like my ascendant and his ascendant are exactly the same. It so happens that my son and daughter's moon are exactly the same as their mom's, my wife's moon. But that doesn't always happen. It's not always an exact carbon copy, but it's always, you can see the fingerprint of the parent in the child's chart. Like, for example, I think my oldest son's chart exemplifies that well. It's Saturn in the ascendant, and that ascendant is in Rohini. And his dad's moon is Rohini with a Capricorn ascendant. So it takes that form. What else we got here? What results will Venus give in a nakshatra owned by its enemy, Jupiter? You got to stop thinking that nakshatras are owned by planets. They're not. Taittiriya Brahmana says that nakshatras are owned by the gods. The planets are associated to nakshatras simply for the sake of calculating the dasha schedule. Please remember that that's my opinion. Venus and Satyabhishek in the 8th house. Sounds nice. What if Ketu's in the 6th house? Ketu in the 6th house is the opposite of what you would want. Like, classically speaking, don't get scared if I say something like that, because don't forget that this is just one part of a chart. And who even knows the way you're calculating it? Maybe somebody else will calculate it differently. But Ketu actually would perform great in the 12th house. And Rahu would be great in the 6th house. So if you're getting Ketu in the 6th and Rahu in the 12th, then there's a clash between externalism and internalism on the Rahu side. And there's a clash between withdrawing where you need to come forward on the Ketu side. Let's see what else we got here. Let's scroll down. What am I trying to read here? Let's see. Give me a good question, somebody. Do I believe in remedies? And Nancy says she hopes that I see somebody's question. What's the question? I have Venus in exact conjunction with Rahu and Aslesha in the 7th house. With this, what is the appearance of my crush? I don't know. I really want to know something about your 7th lord. You know? But Venus and Rahu and Aslesha in the 7th house, it's funny that this is the question that you ask, and that also uses the word crush, right? Because that really matches that you have Venus and Rahu. Venus with Rahu is going to be a great externalization of the Venus principles. So Venus is the principle of relationships, love, and beauty. Rahu with Venus is going to make that highly expressed and highly visible and externalized. And then in the 7th house is going to, I think, look at what Nancy said, be wildly charming. Probably going to want somebody that's not very shy. But look at other things too. It's like, where's your Mars? Will tell you who you're going to get the fire spark for. And where's your 7th Lord? What's that like? Look at this divisional 7th chart, the D7th chart, Saptamsha. Here's a question. Please, is it true that ashleshans come in pairs, separate, and then reunite after death? I can't answer that question because I can't remember anything that happens after death. The nature of the whole process of being born again makes you forget what happened before death. So if anybody's going to sit around and tell you that, you just choose whether or not you want to believe it. The thing that is true about Ashlesha is that it's pair. Their pairs are pluralities. I mean, Sarpanam Ashlesha. If you look at the constellation of Ashlesha in the sky, you'll find that it's a lot of stars. There's not one big primary star for Ashlesha. It's a lot of stars. And it's Sarpanam. It's a plural. Serpents are the devas. And then it's Abhyagachanta and Abhyanrityanto are the words used to describe Ashlesha. So Nritya is dancing. Dancing is done in a group or in pairs. So Ashlesha definitely isn't solitary. It definitely is interested in union. And whether or not the rest of it is true, I can't say. Nakshatra book is, as I answered at the beginning of the session, the Nakshatra book, what happened with that was when I started doing that series of life lessons from the Vedic Nakshatras, I realized exactly the format that I realized exactly what I wanted to say in the commentaries on the Nakshatra Sutra. So I started significantly adding to and revising the format of what I'd written. So it's going to probably not be done until I'm done with that series. Then when I'm done with that series, I just have to proofread it and then put it together and print it. So look for the end of that series, Life Lessons from the Vedic Nakshatras, and expect like 2 or 3 weeks after that my translation and commentary on Nakshatra Sutra will actually get published. Floating wisdom, is it true that Ketu is associated with psychic leanings? That's what I told you before when you asked me about Jupiter and Ketu. Ketu is the node of the moon, where the moon is coming down underneath the sun's orbit again. So Ketu represents things going in. And so what's inside you, your mind. So Ketu is very associated with anything psychic, mystic, mental, internal. Do I believe in remedies? Of course I believe in remedies. Do I believe in ritualistic remedies? Yes. Do I believe in ritualistic? Because rituals have great power. And symbols have great power. What you need a good guide to explain to you what a ritual really is and what the components of the ritual that you're performing are actually signify. For example, you can invest meaning into some simple thing like a piece of paper. You could draw a picture on a piece of paper of something that's really bothering you and invest the meaning into that paper and then rip or burn the paper. And that would be a great ritual to perform if you're doing it right. Otherwise, you're just ripping a piece of paper. So the problem with ancient rituals is that nobody understands what they mean anymore, and people just do them like robots. So they're not going to have much effect. The idea of paying somebody else to do a ritual for you is bogus. You got to be there. You got to participate in it. The idea of wearing a ring to fix something is bogus. It's never recommended in any astrology, like Shastra. It's never recommended in any classical Sanskrit astrology text to use a gem for a remedy. This is something new. It probably isn't even of Indian origin. What is recommended in the Vedic texts, as we did that whole segment on my channel. Look it up. Look up on my channel, the backlog videos. There's a whole bunch of things about remedies in the Brihat Parashara or Shastra, to give charity, to perform rituals, to give charity, to do mantras are the most recommended things. What a mantra does is it gives you a new idea. And then you consistently contemplate that idea. So really the essence of what a remedy is a new idea. Like I answered somebody else's question in the beginning was, what do you do if you have a lousy chart? You have to have a new idea about what lousy means. It's lousy for doing what you already want. That's why you feel like it's lousy. So the remedy to that is to get some new idea in your head about what you want. Because, nobody really just wants something specific. Everybody wants happiness. And it doesn't matter if you get it from Coca-Cola or cocaine. They just want happiness. So it doesn't matter if you can't get the thing that you fixated on and think that you want. You will be just as happy if you can get happiness from something else. So you should be able to give up on your desires that aren't working out and accept other desires. Get a new idea about what's desirable in life. That's the best remedy. What else we got here? What other questions we got? Do planets that are at angles behave differently with each other depending on whether they are square or in opposition? That's the Persian idea. I believe it's the idea that oriented in Persia. My Western history isn't great. Maybe it's earlier Greek or Babylonian or something. But basically the Western concept of, or maybe it's just more modern than the original concept. But for whatever reason, the current Western concept of aspects is that 180 degrees is different than 90 degrees. And I think what they actually say is that 180 degrees is really bad, really difficult, and 90 degrees is like just tense. And 120 or 240 is smooth and nice. We don't really say the same thing in Vedic aspects. This is one place where we clearly differ. But we do say that Jupiter, who forms trine aspects, is smooth, and that Saturn and Mars, who form square aspects, are rough. So he wants to know if there's a difference between being square or opposite. I've not seen that mentioned in any of the texts that I've studied, which means any of the classical astrology texts that I've studied. All that I've seen mentioned consistently is that planets that are in angles to one another strengthen one another and could support one another. For example, the Kama-Druma yoga, the yoga where the moon has no neighbors, no friends to support it, it can be mitigated if the moon has planets in its angles, because that angular planet gives support. Shankha yoga. A lot of the yogas aren't just formed by conjunctions of planets. A lot of the house-based yogas that I said were important to know for Vedic astrology, it's not just formed by conjunction, but a lot of times it's formed by being angular to one another. And they never say that it's if it's 180 degrees, it's different than if it's 270 or 90. What else we got? How do you find the future husband's basic physical characteristics? 7th house in the birth chart and Navamsha, or what else? Thank you. Okay, so here we're already accepting that you want to do this through astrology, but let's put this into perspective. That don't make astrology replace your eyes. Well, let astrology augment your eyes. All right. If you read the Puranas and the Mahabharata, you don't find people making their marriage choices based on astrology. I would like somebody to show me in the Puranas one case where the marriage choice was determined on astrology. Even if you could show one case, I've got about 6,000 cases. I've got every other case in the Puranas and Mahabharata where there was no astrology involved in the matching of the husband and the wife. So just keep it in perspective that it's not the make or break thing is the astrology. The astrology augments your knowledge, but it shouldn't replace your basic knowledge. So if you want to know the characteristics of your husband, the first thing you should be thinking is, what do I need in a man? What do I like in a man? And that should be the characteristics in your future husband. Then if you want to augment that with your astrology, the thing that you should do is look at the 7th Lord. And a lot of times it's the 7th sign, actually, too. In a lot of cases, the sign of the 7th house is going to have a lot to do with the characteristics of the husband or the wife. You know, if the 7th house is Cancer, then probably the wife is going to be like Cancer in some way. Maybe very voluptuous, or maybe chunky, or maybe mothery or something, or maybe a little shy. Those kind of properties, the Cancer properties, may come in. If the 7th Lord is in a particular sign, the characteristics of that sign will be involved in the nature of the spouse. If the 7th Lord is being aspected by certain planets, if the 7th house is being occupied by certain planets, those planets are going to affect the character, are going to indicate the character of the spouse. And then, look at that, and you'll have more than enough information from that to guide you and to augment your natural instincts. Here's an interesting question. Oh, there's two interesting questions. Somisak, is marriage a fate or a choice? Is there a difference between a fate and a choice? A fate is an outcome of a choice. Remember that. So a fate is just an outcome of a choice that you've already acted on. And then marriage is, and everything is a combination of your choice of how you react to your fate. Whether it's marriage or whether it's bowling. Everything in life is the way that we choose or neglect to choose, which is also a choice, to deal with the fate, which is the repercussions of the previous choices that we made. Who is that? That's such a nice reply. Thank you, Yana. God, I'm a Capricorn. I'm a Capricorn ascendant. So I have a Cancer 7th house. My moon is in Rohini, in Gemini, in the 6th house. My Venus is in Raja Yoga in the 9th house. So you can understand the kind of person I'd be attracted to. No, Nancy, I don't have a calculator site for charts, but if you go to my site, victorcara.com, you can get my reports, which give you the calculations of the charts. Second marriage, Ravi Prasad. How do you see it? It's difficult. You're going into advanced astrology that a master would need to do, and you can't just give you an answer and then you're going to go try it and make it work. The second marriage is not easy to see. You first have to determine that there is a second marriage, and then you have to say, the way that I do it is, I need to know about the first marriage from you. You know, what were the traits? I'll look at the chart and I'll see these are the traits which are involved in marriage, and then tell me the things that you've already experienced, These are the ones that are left over, that haven't been experienced yet. So those are the ones that are coming next. Let's see what else we got. Cara Loli Emily wants to know if my wife is Cancer ascending with the moon in the 10th house. So it's exactly Cancer ascending with the moon in the 6th house. Very, very philosophical, spiritual person, and very strong. So you got all that stuff like moon in the 6th, like a strong person. 7th lord in the 6th, likes a strong person. Rohini, she's a great cook. Moon ascending with Cancer rising, it's like perfect. Mangalik. Does the Mangalik dosha apply in the second marriage? It's going to apply. The Mangalik just shows, what Mangalik shows is that Mars has a significant influence on the 7th house. You should calculate it wisely and not just take the quick rule of thumb for it. The quick rule of thumb is if there's a sign version of the planetary aspect to the 7th house, right? Then you're going to be called a Mangalik. But just, you should think about it more carefully. If there's an actual aspect from Mars to the cusp of the 7th house, and if Mars also has similar conjunction or aspect to the 7th lord, the 7th house from the moon, like that, you can make a more sophisticated calculation based on the basic template to see how the extent of Mangalik is. In my compatibility reports, I have a section that does that for you. Then the Mangalik shows that what it's showing, why do you care? Why does anybody care about how Mars affects the 7th principle? Because Mars is independence, but the 7th principle is cooperation and partnership. So they're opposites. And that's what I was saying earlier about what's the most important thing about interpreting a Vedic chart. Know these basic things. When things are going in this synergistic, then you get good results. When things are clashing, then you get difficult results. So Mars aspect on the 7th lord is this clash. On 7th house things is a clash. So it's going to always apply. That this is the nature of the karma that you have in this life, is that the independence is affecting the cooperation is affecting the independence. They're clashing with each other. What you want to do is marry somebody that's on the same page as you. This will solve every problem. You get synergy. So you don't want to marry a person that's going to feel clingy, needy, and not independent. You want to marry a person that has a significant Mangal influence or Mars influence on the 7th house and its principles. Needs to marry a person that's got a significant influence of Mars on those same principles, so that you're on the same page and you understand what makes each other happy. Okay. Let's see what else we got here. How do you remedy the Sun conjunct Saturn in the 3rd house? You got to talk more about this. You have to talk with a therapist, like an astrologer. You have to talk about this. You have to first understand accurately what that Sun and Saturn conjunction in your 3rd house actually is causing. Then you can take a mantra for the Sun or Saturn or something and understand it the right way and use it. Shravana in the 5th for writing is very good. Let's hope it's aspected or occupied by something. Mars and Cancer? What's this question about Mars and Cancer? Oh, we're over time. I get to take a break now. Yeah, all right, I'll take my break. So, good. This was fun, right? Sorry I was an hour late. But I hope you guys had a good time. Sorry if there's questions that I missed. I hope everybody had a good time. And we'll do this again next week. I'll try to get the hour correct next week. Thanks, everybody.